Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel and thanks for logging on. If you enjoy these videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel right here, Watchbox Reviews. I'd really appreciate it, and you'll get a daily dose of our favorite watches. And if you'd like to purchase this Blancpain or any of its pre-owned counterparts, check out our website, thewatchbox.com, the largest repository of pre-owned watches on the internet, with prices, accessories, and high-res images for your desktop for all of our pre-owned Blancpain inventory. Now, the watch on my wrist represents the most ambitious dive watch that's ever seen the light of day. A concept watch come to life from the first examples in 2011 to the present. This remains the only watch on the face of the earth or below the surface of the ocean that can send an Hublot Oceanographique 4000 scurrying for cover or make a PAM 341 look like a Datejust. This is the Blancpain X Fathoms reference 5018. Big, yes, you better believe it. The watch is 55.7 millimeters across the round of the case, and you can see on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, it makes every millimeter of its 24 millimeter thickness known, and proudly. Standing so proud of the wrist, it's almost half again as thick as my wrist. Absolutely outlandish. If you were to measure the watch from side to side, rather than just across the round of the case, like actually measure it from extremity to extremity down the wrist, the watch is an extraordinary 65 millimeters, and if you measure it extreme to extreme across the wrist, again, 65 millimeters. It is titanium, but again, so much geography on your wrist means even titanium can't completely evacuate the heft of this watch. It still feels like a substantial luxury article and professional diving tool. The strap is extraordinary. You don't get much of a sense of the case or lug profiles because the watch doesn't really have any lugs the way a conventional 50 Fathoms would. Instead, you have perhaps the world's most advanced and over-engineered multi-piece injection molded strap. It's really more like a manacle or part of a gauntlet on your wrist. It's constructed of metal fixtures and injection molded rubber such that there are 14 individual pieces comprising the assembly, and this double pin Ardian buckle looks like a weapon that came out of Game of Thrones, not a buckle for a wristwatch. The buckle by itself is about the size of the face of a Lady Datejust. Absolutely insane. You'll also note that the slots for the pins are themselves aligned in a diagonal for a perfect secure fit. They thought of everything, and you'll note on the underside plenty of gaps for aerating the wrist and allowing moisture, heat, sweat, and grit to escape on a hot day. You'll also note that the watch features what may be the world's smallest fallout shelter, or perhaps a nuclear reactor to power all of this watch's features. In fact, what appears to be a little bit of a fallout shelter symbol on the back is a grating over a mesh that leads to the mechanical depth gauge, and this watch features not one but two with a memory system. Now, moving around the case, let's take a look at what we've got here. On the crown side, you have a crown that really needs no crown guard with a screw-down architecture, and underneath the adjacent mesh, you'll see this 300-meter water-resistant diver does have a helium escape valve. Though the depth gauge is only calibrated to 90 meters, the watch is certified to 300. You'll also note that the bezel is immense and broad and sapphire capped like the standard 5015, so it's also fully luminescent. We're going to take a look at this watch in the dark in a moment. Now, there are two buttons on the 9 o'clock side, one of which is covered with a hinged lock to protect it. This is the reset system for the depth gauge, so when you dive, the watch will remain pinned, indicating the deepest point of your dive. So you always have that memory of the deepest part of your dive, partly for the sake of decompression. Now, you can reset the memory by pressing this pusher down at 8 o'clock. Another pusher, this time up at 10 o'clock, let's get super close because this is a fun feature, activates the flyback 5-minute countdown chronograph, which works like so. Now you're watching a 5-minute countdown chronograph. You can use it for just about anything, but it's intended to be used in conjunction with a decompression scale to time your decompression stops of 5 minutes as you ascend. The bezel itself has a crack like a rifle. It is an absolute pleasure to use and to behold. It is far sharper with a more crisp response. You can feel it, you can hear it more distinctly than the bezel, which is rather refined on a standard 50 Fathoms 5015. This is an entirely different animal with the exception of the quality. It features the same cambered or rolled bubble-shaped sapphire that is quite expensive to assemble. Note many watches that have sapphire-capped bezels have flat sapphires. Here, as with the 5015, it's rounded and domed, and then underneath fully luminescent calibrations. The dial is bewildering at first, but quite logical. You can see quarter Arabics, 12, 3, 6, and 9, and then the flyback chronograph function, the countdown timer. Then you have a scale that runs from 0 to 15 that is sensitive to intervals as small as 30 centimeters as you're diving. And then at center, you can see there's another orange hand, and that primary orange hand above the memory indicator indicates from 0 to 90 meters. So you have from 1 to 15 for ultra-precise reading of shallow depths, and then you have a 90-meter graduation inboard of that in a concentric scale. The name of the watch is X Fathoms. It's pronounced X Fathoms. 50 Fathoms, X Fathoms, reference 5018. And the 18 is your cue as to the power plant underneath this monstrous metal carapace. It's based on the 1315 5-day automatic in a standard 50 Fathoms, but there are additional tricks. First of all, it's one of the thickest movements ever created, as the caliber, all told, is 13 millimeters thick. It uses a mechanical depth gauge, so unlike, for example, many Panerai depth gauge watches from the past, this one needs no battery to operate it. It's more akin to Jaeger-LeCoultre or IWC's Deep 1, Deep 2, Deep 3 series. Now, the movement itself has 3 mainspring barrels, automatic winding, and a 5-day power reserve. It does feature hacking seconds, so you can stop the seconds hand and synchronize precisely to a dive timer. The movement is also a 48 joule assembly with 411 parts, so this may be one of the most complicated diving instruments ever created. For good measure, it features a tough free-sprung balance that gives it robust shock resistance, beats away at a modern 28,800 vibrations per hour, and uses an anti-magnetic silicon hairspring, so it has additional resistances for you landlubbers or those who may be diving close to the poles where magnetic fields can be intense. That is a lot to recite and remember, and with an original retail price of about $40,000, this is one of the most expensive base metal divers ever made. Also one of the most complex and one of the few honest-to-God concept watches that has come completely to life. And hey, purists, this may not be what you had in mind, but I'm often asked, does Blancpain make a 50 Fathoms without a date? Your ship, or should I say your missile sub, has come in. See it on the watch box. Kaboom! Maybe this watch is radioactive after all. This is a downright nuclear Lume shot. Note how every feature of the dial is entirely visible, including that awesome little 5-minute countdown. This is not just one of the most sensational Lume shots you will ever experience, but hey, if you do want to time something from 0 to 60 minutes, day or night, just line up that minute hand and you're good to go. So you can time a 5-minute decompression stop with the chronograph and anything between 0 and 60 minutes with the bezel. Possibly the most satisfying dive bezel this side of a Panerai submersible, maybe even better. This may be your only chance to buy the X Fathoms pre-owned, as I've seen one of these in 4 years, an absolute sensation and supernova. See it on the watch box.